Rejoice, Jerusalem, I say rejoice. Laetare, Sunday, in which we mark this near halfway point of Lent, is an opportunity to rejoice in our Lenten journey towards Easter. We wear the rose vestments as a sign of our joy for what lies ahead, that our prayer, our fasting, our almsgiving are given a purpose in the resurrection of Christ. We know the end of the story. We know how it all unfolds and gives purpose and meaning to our sacrifices, gives purpose and meaning to our sufferings here on earth. It's indeed the Catholic perspective why Catholics, true devoted Catholics, are able to suffer, are able to endure great pain with a sense of peace that others are not, who often fall into despair, who often fall into depression, because they don't have the hope, the joy-filled hope of the end that's been revealed to us, that's already been made present to us in the resurrection, in the Holy Eucharist, the Paschal mystery of Christ's everlasting life made present for us always. Joy is something that is particularly unique to the Christian religion. Pope Francis has emphasized this over and over, that we as disciples of Christ should be following him with joy, that our lives should radiate the joy of the gospel, which is exactly what he entitled his first encyclical. That the joy of discipleship radiates not only in our facial expressions or our words, but in everything that we do. That the resurrection of the Lord gives us purpose in our daily life, our daily sufferings, the daily crosses that we bear. So on this Laetare Sunday, we recognize our own crosses that we've endured in a particular way during this Lenten season. And we do so with the recognition that it's not in vain, it's not for some kind of masochistic purpose, some kind of self or vainglory kind of reason to see, well, I gave up chocolate to see how much weight I could lose, or some other kind of self-gratifying purpose. But the purpose is beyond us. This purpose is greater than us, which is a springboard into our gospel we know so well, the gospel of the prodigal son. The son, like us, like so many of us, who abandoned the will of the Father and turned away in a life of dissipation, away an extreme example, an extreme way for Christ to tell us sin, self-gratification, self-satisfaction, self-indulgence, to not indulge the will of God, but to turn, or neighbor, but indulge his own desires, to seek his will first above that of God and neighbor. What is important as well in reading this famous passage from St. Luke's Gospel is that this is not a parable that Jesus just made up to prove a point. This was an old Jewish parable. that every scribe and Pharisee and every teacher of the law used as an example to teach about God's law, about right and wrong. And the parable followed very much along the same lines until the point of the son's return. And in the Jewish parable, the son returns to find the father back at the house. And as the social customs of the day would demand, the son to go up to the father, to kneel, to grovel before him, and to beg for mercy. But the father to say, "No, you are dead to me. You had your chance, and you squandered it. When you squandered your inheritance, when you took what was mine and had given it to you, and you lost it forever. There are no second chances. You are dead to me." That's how the Jewish parable went. That is how it had been for thousands of years. And so when Christ started telling this parable, you can imagine the scribes and Pharisees just sitting there like, "Yeah, I've heard this story a million times." Kind of like some of us perhaps when we hear the Gospels. Yeah, I've heard it before, Father. Come on, get done with this. But then Jesus turns it on its head. He flips it upside down. Not only does the son not have to go up and grovel at the feet of his father comes running out to meet him. His father has been waiting for this day. His father has been looking out and awaiting his son's return. But the son can barely finish his apology before the father throws the robe upon him, new sandals, places the signet ring on his finger, proclaims a feast in his honor. Not only is the son forgiven, but he is elevated to a place of honor above his other son. He is not dead to the Father. He is remarkably alive. This is what happens in the sacrament of reconciliation, and this is why Christ used this parable as an example. One, the shock effect, to get the scribes and Pharisees and all the followers' attention because they knew this so well. But to clearly demonstrate that the mercy of God is transformative. Not only does it forgive and reconcile, but it brings us into a greater relationship with God, a higher level of dignity than we had at the beginning. We're infused with an indwelling of the Holy Spirit, that sanctifying grace that transforms us into that greater and more perfect image and likeness of God Himself. We become more like God. Indeed, this breeds jealousy. It breeds jealousy upon those who are not like God, those who have not received this grace. For indeed, that's the work of the devil, the diabolos in Greek, the divider, to tear apart, to create division where division doesn't exist. Rather than rejoicing in one person's good, to be envious, to be jealous of another person's good, of another person's blessing. And we see this in the older son, jealous of his brother, jealous that his brother is forgiven, jealous that his brother is blessed, envious. But indeed, God's mercy is not exempt from the older brother. The older brother who has obeyed is indeed blessed, is indeed given a grace and strengthened all the same to do good and to avoid evil. But by giving in to this jealousy, giving in to this envy, he himself is slowly tearing himself away from his God, from his Father, from his family. God's mercy is for all. Those who have squandered everything into the greatest possible sins that we might imagine in our life, and those who perhaps feel that we've been obedient. We haven't done anything wrong. His mercy is for us all. It's not limited to the greatest of sinners. And some people, like the older son, think, well, I don't need to go to confession because, well, that person's a lot worse than I am. Well, they may be worse than you are, but that doesn't mean we're not without fault. That doesn't mean that we are not in need of God's grace. All of us need this gift. All of us need this power of the Holy Spirit to grow closer, that second effect of the sacrament, to be strengthened, to be transformed, to be elevated beyond where we were to the greatness that God calls us to. Rejoice, Jerusalem, I say again, rejoice. We rejoice in this special season of Lent during this Laetare Sunday because what lies ahead is greater than anything we can ever have here on earth. That our Lenten time of prayer, fasting, almsgiving is oriented towards a greater good, towards a greater celebration, a greater promise than we can ever behold or imagine here on earth. And so is God's greatness contained in the seven sacraments, that the goodness that he bestows, that he pours forth into our hearts through his grace, transforms us, changes us, gives us the power. As St. Paul tells us in his second letter to the Corinthians, that Christ has cleared the path by the cross, has burst open the gates to salvation, to open for us the greatness of eternity. But we must be reconciled. We must accept that power into our life. We must allow God in, and in doing so, to let ourselves become like God, and to become perfected in his greatness. Let him into our hearts, our minds, our souls, and to be changed into the great saint he's always desired us to be. As we rejoice with the Lord always and every single day of our lives, this day is a particular day to rejoice, to call to mind God's greatness in our life and in the life of the church and the life of the world, and to grasp onto that, not into all the negativity, to not harbor jealousy, envy, hatred, all the daughters of pride that want to destroy, but to rejoice and set our sights on God's greatness and let it propel us into the greatness of eternity, to be with God in that greatness forever.